You wake up, put on your Ray-Ban Meta glasses. You're living all in. You realize you need coffee. So you say,
"Hey, Meta, how do I make a latte?"
Brew 2 shots of espresso.
After Meta AI gets you caffeinated, you're ready for some beats.
"Hey, Meta, play hip-hop music."
You head to meet some friends, but can't remember the place.
"Hey, Meta, call Eva."
Ray-Ban Meta glasses, the next generation of AI glasses. Just say, "Hey, Meta," to harness the power of Meta AI. Shop now at meta.com/smartglasses.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. People always say it's good to unwind, but that's easier said than done. The exception, Chumba Casino. They actually make it easier done than said, or at least the same. Chumba Casino is an online social casino with hundreds of casino-style games like slots and blackjack. Play for fun. Play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Sign up now and collect your free welcome bonus at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
Have you spent a regrettable amount of time scrolling through shows and praying for something new, or hearing about a show but having no idea where to find it? We all have. Head over to The Hollywood Reporter and check out THR Charts to find a menu of all the streamers' biggest shows, what's trending, reviews, and where to watch these great shows and films. The Hollywood Reporter is the source for insider entertainment news. Visit THR.com today and follow us at Hollywood Reporter on all your social platforms.
Just in case you missed it, it's the top 5 sports talkers of the day. Now, it's time for Dan Barrero's Top 5 at 5.
All right, let's get this thing started. Top 5 at 5, Ben Goessling at 5:30. And we're out at 6 o'clock for Vikings programming, as is customary every Thursday during the football season.
And a little bit later tonight, 8:30 to be exact. Well, maybe like 8:42, depending on the game before and tip times and everything. Karl Anthony Towns and the New York Knicks are at Target Center to take on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Cats' first game back here against Minnesota. Remember, these two teams played in the preseason at the Garden, and it was a playoff atmosphere, Dan, in the preseason, going all the way back to
but that's preseason.
October and November. Yeah. This one's for real. Knicks are the 3 seed right now in the Eastern Conference, behind Cleveland and Boston. The Wolves, I believe, are 7th today.
Is this for all the marbles? You got the pumps out, you got the Uzis.
Finals preview? I don't know.
Okay.
But Karl, Minnesota, what was it about this place that captured your hearts and mind?
I think it's the fans, the community. Obviously, a big part of it, too, is Flip. Flip, the man who he was so easy to talk to. Obviously, we know how he is as a coach, how great of a coach he is. So having that kind of opportunity to be part of this amazing community that I never had known before, truthfully, and to be here, to be accepted by this community, be empowered by this community, to have an amazing mentor like KG, to have an amazing coach and friend like Flip, and then to have the amazing teammates that I had, and vets like Tayshaun Prince, Andre Miller,
Jimmy Butler,
remember them, Mr. Martin. I just wanted to be the best I could be with whatever NBA jersey I put on, but I especially wanted to be my best here in the Timberwolves jersey. And this place has given my family so much, not even from a financial aspect, but just from a life aspect of the experiences, the moments we were able to have because of the organization and the things we were able to accomplish here. Those are things that you could never discredit, you can never lose love for, and I continue to see Minnesota as a home for me.
In fact, it was a home for him last night. He stayed at his house in the suburbs of Minneapolis and will be in the lineup, of course, tonight when the Knicks take on the Wolves.
I wonder what temperature he turned the thermostat down to, like when he's not there.
Right.
You think
he could probably do it from his phone.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Everything's automated.
Yeah,
right.
I'm sure he's got a smart house.
You can't turn it off completely. Then you got frozen pipe issues. You know all about that.
Unfortunately, I do. J.R. Ryder and me.
Back in the day.
Both know.
Yeah. We talked about this extensively with Johnny. We talked about it, you and I did early in the show. I I don't think it's going to be one of those nights where it's going to be fraught with tension and controversy about, well, is he going to get booed off the court? If there are going to be any boos at all, they're going to be, I think, largely the good-natured, obligatory variety. You're the enemy now, so I got to root against you or I got to boo you. But not that anybody's heart is in it. And I think largely there's every reason to think that most people are going to salute, even if they used to roll their eyes, and I did among a lot of people, some of the things he did and some of the things he said, that the broader view of it is he ended on about as successful a note as one can. He helped get this team to the conference finals, and who knows where it was going to go from there. The trade was indeed made. So I expect, and according to, it sounds like Johnny was hinting that they're going to have go above and beyond the normal sort of coming back to town sort of video.
I think that's cool.
Is it possible they're going to retire his number in the rafters tonight?
Anything's possible.
Yeah. That might be a bit much.
But
it sounds like they've got some things planned. And I'm curious from a basketball standpoint, like who guards them? And can our great defense, because it's becoming great again, if we can sustain it, handle their state-of-the-art offense? They're not a great defensive team at all. We are a still mediocre offensive team, but we've had this little mini surge because we've started guarding people at an extremely high level once again. And the Knicks calling card is scoring, and our calling card right now is stopping scoring.
Quick.
And by the way, stop the complaining about how late the game is. I heard this last night, too, with the Wild game, which was also like 8. It was, I don't know when time it actually started, but it was close to 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
We want it both ways.
This is
apparently.
what we wanted.
Allegedly, we wanted to have national exposure. Well, to get national exposure, if you're in the Midwest time zone, a lot of times the East Coast game is going to be the early game, and that means we're going to have to be later.
Yeah.
So this idea that, like, oh, my God, it's so late. What are we going to do? Do you want to be anonymous again? Do you want to be an organization, in either case, where no national network wants to have you on? What is it? What exactly do we want to be?
We want to complain. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, that's it. That's got a lot.
This gets you ready for the playoffs.
You are correct.
In the first 2 rounds, we're always at 8:30.
Yeah,
in
you're
both
right.
Wild and Wolves
and
cases.
For us, it's annoying because if it was an earlier start tonight, I would have probably originated from Target Center tonight.
If it was a 7, we both would have been there.
And both of us,
yeah. I think we would have figured it out.
But the fact that it was so late, there weren't going to be anybody around to really have on who was going to be on location. There's not going to be much of a vibe there because we're off at 6 o'clock.
We will talk Vikings with Ben Goessling about 20 minutes from now. I do want to mention this Twins nugget. Your guy Jeff Passan from ESPN doing kind of like a off-season hot stove trade primer.
Yes.
When he gets to the Twins section, says the Twins have listened on right-hander Pablo Lopez, and if free agent pitching prices remain stratospheric, perhaps they'll go beyond the listening stage. What type of haul?
What does that mean? Oh, that they could get a big haul for him?
What type of haul would you want for Pablo Lopez?
Then you're back to starting. How old is Lopez? He's not 50.
Very old. No, and he's been pretty good.
I don't want the big package for one pitcher. I don't want
You don't like that package.
I don't want 9 draft choices and 4 guys who are in the top 65 in the Baseball America.
I was going to ask, how many Baseball America top 100 do you need?
And my sources say Phoenix guy doesn't want that. Ishbia? What's his name?
Yeah, Ishbia.
He doesn't want that.
There's 2 Ishbias.
There's 2 Ishbias. The one who wants us, he doesn't want any part of that. And how about the other Ishbia? You see the price slashing on concessions?
Their concessions, yes.
You can get like all you can eat hot dogs for like $2. You keep going back.
Well, you can get 1 hot dog for 2.
I thought it was all you can eat.
By the way, I did tweet that out yesterday.
Yes. And you got ripped?
Well, I was reminded, and I think we did talk about this, and I was naive to think that it would be taken as anything but a pull-ad cheap shot, which it kind of was. But the pull-ads did do that in 2019. They also have family-friendly concessions prices for hot dogs, popcorn, bottles of water.
You sure?
I am sure.
I thought that was for certain tickets.
No, there's a family section where they can't have booze or anything, but they do have some cheaper concessions, the same.
So a hot dog anywhere in Target Field is $2.
I don't know about anywhere, but they have specific stands like they will in Phoenix.
Oh, I thought in Phoenix it was across the board. It was these are just our new prices.
Just on those little items, on those 5 or 6 items.
Meanwhile, the nachos will still be $22.
Yes, and I'll say, and I did to somebody who pointed that out to me. that $2 is still cheaper than $2.99, which is what the poll ads were charging. $2.99, but they have been doing it for a while. The Atlanta Falcons have done it for a while. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You got to give people a chance if they're coming to your games.
Well,
you got to give them a chance.
If you really want to give them a chance, you make it true of all the concessions.
No
food,
doubt.
because then at some point it just becomes a little bit of a game. But
no question, it's absolutely a game.
Yeah. And in my case, this is how defensive the seam heads are. In my case, it wasn't attempted to be a cheap shot about here at all in any way, shape, or form. But the reflexive desire to protect these owners in this town is bizarre to me. It's absolutely peculiar. There's no other ownership group that gets protected by some of the Jackals the way the poll ads do. It's bizarre to me. What are you? Are you going to get in the will? What are you protecting exactly? Anyway,
we should straddle because we're out at 6. We got to get moving.
Let's get out of here. I'm going to try a quick A section item, and then we'll prepare for Ben Goessling.
The only thing better than the holidays are holidays packed with NFL games. Kicking off Thursday, December 19th with an AFC West showdown.
Touchdown Chargers!
Then a Saturday doubleheader. 12 games Sunday with a battle in Lambeau on Monday night.
Oh, what a play! What a catch!
And a Christmas Day doubleheader for the ages on Netflix.
Oh, sweet Marie!
That's how the NFL does the holidays.
By the way, it is worth noting, if we were extending the top 5 at 5, that indications are that starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, Geno Smith, will play against the Purple on Sunday. He is vowing he's going to play. I think he's already been involved in practice. How effective he will be is a fair question, but it looks like Geno, the starter, will be. There's a good chance he's going to be in action against the Purple. A section real quick. We quote occasionally a guy who these days, I think he used to write for the New York Times, and now he writes for The Atlantic, named Michael Powell. And he linked to a story out of New York, headlined, "I was blindsided. New York man records moment he was shoved onto subway tracks." And Powell writes, "I know this man, a New Yorker of more than a half century and a very good guy, shoved from behind by a big mentally ill nut. He went airborne at noon on Sunday at Herald Square, a very broken system for handling and restraining violent, mentally ill people." It's relevant and timely because we had a story that we didn't devote a lot of time on because we've been so toy department heavy lately. The story in which Daniel Penny, who was he was eventually cleared of all charges in choking Jordan Neely to death in the subway last May, a story that got a lot of attention at the time and then did when those verdicts went down. And Powell's point, and the point several others have made, including a former New York cop that I'm going to quote here, it's sort of the same story on repeat. To a large extent, as tragic as the loss of Jordan Neely's life was, it's the same story being repeated over and over again that is contributing to the possibility that things could end as tragically as they did in that case, and presumably in this case too. Now, this individual who was in the hospital, who was blindsided, did not lose his life, but was injured, and others have been even more seriously injured. And Cop Guy out of New York wrote this on the subject: yawning gaps in our ability to prevent mental health crises on the subway have New Yorkers on edge. For decades now, in the name of more humane treatment for people with serious mental illness, institutionalization has been replaced by a patchwork of outpatient alternatives that haven't proved especially effective for many people, nor kept pace with demand. The point of this piece, and several others, has been that, yeah, it's true to say that Jordan Neely was failed by the system to a significant extent. But part of that failure is pretending that in a subway situation like that, but it didn't even have to be a subway. In many major cities, the idea of that you're doing a service to those individuals, and just as importantly, to the individuals just trying to get from point A to point B, to have to endure that kind of stress is part of the problem. That it's not going to get better if we pretend that we simply allow individuals who aren't even, in many cases, capable of understanding what they're doing to be loose in that kind of environment. A little bit more on that part of it. The system fails because it isn't serious enough about delivering critical care to people who are in no mental state to realize how much they need it and how dangerous it is for them to ignore that fact. And so it's no surprise it produces incidents like the death of Jordan Neely, and that juries find them lawful. We can argue about whether Penny held the chokehold too long, but subduing a man in crisis who declared someone is going to die today isn't vigilante justice. It's a defense of self and others. And there were many others who expressed how terrified, black and white, who expressed how terrified they were in that sort of situation. If the government is truly a capable guardian, people have an obligation to step back and let professionals protect them. If not, they can act as well. He goes on to write, here's the big conclusion that I think is really important. Criminals may be impulsive, but they can respond to incentives and deterrence. People with serious mental illness will not be chastened by Neely's death because that's not how mental illness works. Nothing will prevent the next death except a government that admits its approach has created these fraught and dangerous encounters and gives its police and mental health professionals more effective, high-impact tools to head them off before they end in tragedy. And that means, perish the thought, forcing people, if you want to say institutionalizing them, whatever dirty word you want to express, that part has to be, in many cases, part of the discussion again. In many of these cases, these are individuals who have literally dozens, in some cases hundreds, of violations over a period of years. And in, as I recall it, in Neely's case, he'd been put in a place and he'd lasted there. I think he walked out after 2 days. And I'm not even here to blame him if he was, if he had mental illness. But this notion that the average rube who's just trying to get from point A to point B has to be subjected to these sorts of encounters, that's part of the issue. There needs to be as much concern about protecting those individuals as protecting the rights of those who are in very fraught mental health situations and making sure we don't force them to go from point A to point B. One other quickie, unrelated, but also a section that is going to be ready because it's going to get more and more attention as this story circulates. And to a certain extent, you could say it's a bit of a confirmation of what we already knew, but it seemed to take the story one step further. Wall Street Journal has a story headlined, How the White House Functioned with a Diminished Biden in Charge. And the details in this story, if it ends up being journalistically sound and accurate, are frightening. I mean, the implications are frightening. Let me give you an example. If the president, according to the story, was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped altogether. On one such occasion, in the spring of 2021, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. Quote, he has his good days and his bad days. Today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow. That's in the spring of 2021, boys and girls.
Yeah.
And somebody else pointed out, and I think, well, there's all sorts of examples. White House going to great lengths to conceal Biden's decline, not just from the American people, but from members of his own cabinet and key Democrats on the Hill, limited interactions, and used go-betweens to reduce visibility into how frail he'd become. And the upshot of this story, the reminder here is, if you go back not that long to the summer of 2024, and you wrote a piece or even said out loud that you had some concerns about the mental state of the president and the availability of the president and so forth, you know what the reaction was going to be? Well, you know what you're doing? You're one of those misinformation guys. You're peddling. That's dangerous. Because if you recall, there were these cheap fakes where misleading videos were out. And this is another example, Gaardsy, of how we can't see the forest for the trees. Just because there were cheap fakes that needed to be exposed doesn't mean the issue was legit. And when people ask me, well, what are you afraid of? You seem like you want to stand tall for misinformation. I don't want to stand tall for any misinformation, but I'm dubious about we have to quash misinformation. We have to censor misinformation. And this is the reason why, because something that was viewed then as misinformation now is being reported almost casually and daily. The degree to which the guy still in the White House, the current president of the United States, was not available, was not always there, had to cancel meetings because it's not a good day for him.
Think about that.
So it becomes more damning by the week. But the larger lesson has to be, before you start pointing your finger and lecturing about, that's why we've got to get this stuff off of various websites and this has to go away. No, what you do is you vet it and you fire back at it if you don't think there's any evidence of it. But too often, the notion of you just label something to rip it misinformation because that's supposed to shut down any discussion of it. And what we're learning from time to time is what was viewed as misinformation, not even, like I said, just months ago, is now viewed as pretty confirmed. The degree to which this administration protected the guy who's still in the Oval Office as the president of the United States. So we don't need to censor misinformation. We need to vet it. And we also, I think, need to argue against it or fire back on it. Those are two completely different things. But if we're hearing this now, while he's still in office, right? Late December. Imagine what we're going to hear once he's out of office, right? That's the scary part. It's almost like, well, what else are we going to learn after the fact at the degree to which his ability to govern really have been degraded? Very concerning story there as well. Let's pause. We'll return to the safety of the toy department. We'll talk Vikings and Seattle Seahawks and much more with Ben Goessling next.
The only thing better than the holidays are holidays packed with NFL games. Kicking off Thursday, December 19th with the AFC West Showdown.
Touchdown Chargers!
Then a Saturday doubleheader. 12 games Sunday with a battle in Lambeau on Monday night.
Oh, what a play! What a catch!
And a Christmas Day doubleheader for the ages on Netflix.
Oh, sweet Marie!
That's how the NFL does the holidays.
Final segment of the show brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
Oh. Well, that segment, to start this segment, just kind of crept up on me, and it's the final segment today. That's why you're hearing the out music, given that we've got Vikings programming to get to at 6, as is customary on Thursdays during the football season. Later tonight, your Minnesota Timberwolves hosting the Knicks. I think the Wolves are 3.5-point favorites.
Is that right?
At this point. And then tomorrow, Gaardsy and I are both off, and it's going to be Russo Radio in this chair, so there'll be a decent amount of hockey talk, although I think Lavelle is also going to join. Ben Goessling.
And every writer that's ever written anything for The Athletic
that's also
is
true.
Also going to be on.
Goessling joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Are you leaving for Seattle on Friday, tomorrow, or Saturday?
I am leaving on Saturday afternoon,
okay.
I believe.
All right. Will you be visiting the Space Needle? Is the Space Needle still open in Seattle? Do we even know?
Yeah, I think it's still open.
Still there? Okay. I don't. I wonder if people still. I mean, if that is that like from a bygone era, or is it still considered kind of an interesting, curiosity?
I think it's still. I mean, the view up there is great. I think I've only been up there once. I think I tried to go to the Jimi Hendrix thing, and it was closed for the day. So I went up there once to see the sights. So still got to get to the Hendrix thing, but yeah, it's still there. I think it's still a decent tourist attraction. It's one of those things that everybody knows from that city.
So it looks as if indications are that Geno Smith is going to start at quarterback for the Seahawks, correct?
It certainly seems that way. He was getting full participation in practice on Wednesday, which generally is a pretty good sign. So, yeah, it seems like that's going to be the way it goes unless there's something that changes in the next couple of days here.
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, Howell had some moments. I think, look, the Vikings are favored. Now, the odds, I can't tell if the odds reflect a knowledge that, who the starting quarterback was going to be. So it's certainly, I think, a winnable game even with Geno. And Geno is capable of giving up the big pick, especially in the red zone, apparently. Some of his numbers are not very good. But on the other hand, he can make some plays. He sort of reinvented himself there. And I look at it as a much more challenging ball game if he is, reasonably healthy and starting. What about you?
Yeah, I think this is a tough one. I was debating this with Andrew Kramer on our podcast today. We both picked the Vikings to win, but I think it's tight. The Seahawks are pretty banged up in a lot of spots. DK Metcalf is injured. Kenneth Walker, their running back, is injured. I think Leonard Williams on the other side of the ball, he's their sack leader and somebody the Vikings have seen plenty over the years. He's been dealing with a foot injury. So the Seahawks have enough injury issues that will they see the full complement of players? Will the Vikings see the full complement of players? I don't know that we will see as formidable of a challenge that way, but that place has been a house of horrors for the Vikings. Russell Wilson's not there, but they have not won there since 2006. So assuming that anything is going to go smoothly out there for them is a little hard to say. So I think this is still going to be a pretty tough challenge and a team that is fighting for its own playoff life as well in the Seahawks.
Yeah, well, that's what's sneaky. I think we've all, understandably looked ahead now that the Lions have opened the door, both by losing to Buffalo and by getting even more injuries coming their way, to think that, okay, maybe that last game could be kind of interesting. But the 2 weeks heading into it, I think in both of them, my hunch, if you ask me today, for whatever reason, my hunch is the Vikings will beat Seattle, but my hunch is also that they're going to lose to Green Bay here, which would, of course, take a lot of the luster out of that last game with the Lions. And I can't give you a specific reason. I think part of it is I think Green Bay's good. They won, Vikings won the other game, and I go, okay, I could see the two teams splitting and whatever. But that's what's tricky about this. It's hard to do too much projecting because the 2 weeks, even to get you to that spot in Detroit where it might be for the division, ain't going to be easy.
No, they're not. And you've heard Lions fans start to talk about the Vikings not having a terribly high strength of victory as we get into that tiebreaker. But if they run the table with this stretch, I think a lot of those questions will be answered because this is going to be a really tough stretch, especially coming off of a Monday night game. You make the long trip out to the West Coast, and then you come back to play a Packers team that's going to be more physical than what we've seen from them in the past. I mean, they really have doubled down on Josh Jacobs and made him the focal point of that offense, and they've had a lot of success with it. That team is much more about imposing its will on you than we've seen for most of the last 30 years when they've had all these quarterbacks. And they still have Jordan Love, but it's much more about a running identity for them. So when you say Monday night game to West Coast to tough game with the Packers to Detroit week 18 in a game that could be for everything on the line, I mean, you are asking for a lot to go 3-0 in that stretch. If I had to bet, I would not take them to win all three of these. I think winning two is possible, but it's a lot to ask. Just not only the quality of opponents, but the sequence that they're in, the short week and then the travel and then, finishing on the road against the Lions week 18.
Gilmore, it's looking like there's a good chance we will see him back in the lineup this week. Is that correct?
Yes, he was a full participant yesterday and was out there again today. Seems like all systems are heading towards him playing, which they need because Fabian Moreau looks like, he was not practicing again today. We also did not see Harrison Smith today. So a couple of injuries in that secondary to keep an eye on. But yeah, having Gilmore back, especially as Jackson Smith and Njigba has become a bigger part of that offense, that's a team that has some weapons. And I think having Gilmore back is going to be a pretty important component of it, given the ways that the Seahawks can go through receivers and kind of challenge you that way. If Metcalf is in fact playing it, I think that makes it a more difficult matchup if they go three deep there. So having Gilmore in that mix is going to be a big part of it.
Where are we on Ivan Pace Jr.?
Well, I think he's still a week away from being able to return, if I'm not mistaken. I think his return date of that 4 weeks puts him back possibly for that Packers game. I think they're pretty optimistic about him coming back for that, and that's an important one given the Packers run game. I think having him back to deal with some of what they're going to see from Green Bay is a big deal. But yeah, it certainly seems like next week is very much a possibility for him to come back.
A couple of texts I want to get to from the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line. The number is 64686. If you have questions for Ben Goessling, brought to you by, as always, our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Generally joins us on Friday, but as I mentioned earlier, Gaardsy and I are both out tomorrow, and Russo is in. Although my gut tells me you could talk hockey. You wouldn't have you would not have much difficulty answering a few hockey questions, correct?
No, he and I could reminisce about my one season on the beat where I became the walking jinx for the hottest team in the league. And yeah, we could kill at least a segment doing that. That'd be fun.
Refresh my memory on that. I don't remember that. What's that about?
So my return to Minnesota, I was covering baseball in D.C. My first job at the Pioneer Press coming back, I was on the Wild beat and then helping out on the Twins. And the Wild, this was 2011-2012 season. They were red hot. Nobody expected them to be this good. I think like Kyle Brodziak had like 12 goals in the first 2 months of the season. I walk in, I think the day before I covered my first game, Pierre-Marc Bouchard gets hurt, Mikko Koivu gets hurt, my first night in the building. They won twice with me there, I think in the first 2 months I was on the beat, to the point where when Russo and I talked to Chuck Fletcher about this at the end of the season, and he goes, hey, I'd be careful who you mention that around. Hockey players are pretty superstitious. Yes. You might end up in the back of somebody's trunk if you say that too loudly.
Yeah, well,
because they end up missing the playoffs, and it's still a running joke that I ruined that season.
Yeah, there's nobody that I know more superstitious than Lou Nanne. I mean, he literally is the most superstitious person I think I know, to the point where I still tell the story that we were on. We had that when it was. What was it? Hockey Day?
Hockey Day in Minnesota.
Hockey Day in Minnesota, and it was part of it took place. Part of it was a celebration overseas. We went overseas to Kuwait, and it was obviously the Fox Sports North View. That's or group. That's what they were then. They went over there. I was there. Louis was there. A couple other people, and so we're watching the Wild on one of those big screen TVs, and at the end of the first period, let's just say for the sake of this discussion, they're down 2-0. And I saw Louis leave the room and then come right back through where he had just left to come back in through another entrance. There were like two entrances. He left through one exit and went through another entrance, and I said, Louis, I thought you were like one of the restrooms. He said, no. He said, that's what I do. I mean, I got to change it up a little bit, so I got to come in and come out. So he ended up in the exact same place, but he had to get up because in the superstitious Lou Nanne world, he thought that might break the deal. And I don't remember if maybe that was the difference. Maybe the Wild came back and won the game. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, that sounds believable with hockey players. I mean, I think there's a lot of them that, the playoff beards and all of that kind of stuff. It probably it's habit, some of it's superstition. But yeah, he needed to find the entrance that was going to provide better juju than he would have had with the other one, I guess.
All right, I don't want to go too deep because there's been so much discussion about the Darnold future. But I do need you to help me on one aspect of it. So if we play this out and say that the Vikings ultimately decide that we got to keep him, and we're going to hurt his feelings. We might annoy him, but we're going to franchise him. As I understand it, that would be, like $41 million for next season if they did it.
Yep.
The open question is, does that destroy their salary cap plan? In other words, can they hold on to all the good defensive players that they added? Can they re-sign some defensive players that are going to be free agents that they do want to keep? How difficult is it to do that sort of salary cap magic and accommodate that sort of change to the plan when obviously all along it was, well, we can make all these defensive signings and because next year there is no dead cap money at all on Cousins, and our starting quarterback is going to be making peanuts. So is it prohibitive? I mean, does it make it really, really hard to bring everybody back and keep the people back you want, or are there ways to be inventive in that regard?
I think it's doable, and I would say this, they have done more difficult salary cap somersaults in the past than that would be. I mean, they are probably going to have north of $70 million of cap space next year, so they're going to be in a cap spot that we have not seen them in for a long time. So you could do it. You could sign Darnold, or you could tag him, and then still have another probably $35 million, and probably more than that by the time you do a couple of cuts and restructures and that sort of thing. I think you could make it work. The question is, how would they go about, Byron Murphy's a free agent. That's going to be expensive if they want to bring him back. I think they have interest in adding on the offensive line. I think they've identified that as something that may be worth trying to sign a guard, and that's going to get expensive. So how much of the other stuff that you want to do are you going to be able to do? Because I think they only have like 38 players under contract for next year. A lot of these guys that they signed were on one-year deals. They'll need to figure out running back. They'll need to figure out, I think, a couple of spots on the defensive line. They'll need to figure out most of the secondary, because Gilmore is a free agent in addition to Murphy. Shaq Griffin's a free agent. So there's a lot of things to do, and I'm sure they would like to have the money to do that, especially because they don't have a ton of draft picks. So
that's your point.
I don't think it's impossible. I think you'd have to figure out all of those things. But if you did it, it does give you a little more time to figure out how much McCarthy is ready for the job.
Right.
You could even play it out into April. If somebody says, you know what, I don't love my draft options at quarterback, maybe you make a trade at that point. It doesn't have to mean that he's here all year. It just gives you longer than March 15th or whatever it is to make that call. And then if you make the trade, guess what? The draft picks are coming now rather than a comp pick possibly coming in a year. So I don't think it's a terrible option. Players don't like it.
No.
It tends to be a little bit of a cold business move, but they could also say, look, you would not have been in the boat to get this much money if not for what we helped you do this year. So you take the good with the bad there. I certainly think that's a possibility it goes that way.
We named the Stonami much earlier in the program, but as we wrap up, get to the final minutes of today's truncated version of the show, I know you were curious as well. And as it turns out, you might relate to the decision that ultimately the Stonami naming committee went with. This, of course, the first Stonami of the winter season, 2024-25.
Yeah, lay it on me. I haven't heard what it is.
Snow-nami, it's not about the snow-nami, it's about what the snow-nami represents.
We kind of had to do it. It's a little
That's
bit
outstanding.
obvious, but I think we kind of, we got to get it out of our system once, don't you think? For Kirk? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Well, and the thing was, Kirk's last year here, there was basically no snow. So
that's true.
I think there was the only one we had, in fact, was after he had left.
That's
it
right.
Was
good point.
Right in the late March. So there had been no opportunity to do a Kirk-related Stonami naming last year, and I'm sure he'd be very honored. But yeah, that's very well done. I think that fits very nicely with the news cycle, with the last couple of weeks of Kirk Cousins and his interactions with Minnesota, and then his interactions with not being the Falcons' starting quarterback anymore.
It's not about the dollars, but it is about what the dollars represent.
It is stunning. I was mentioning yesterday, a month ago, like early November, he's the cock of the walk, man. They're 6-3. He's playing well. They think
coming out of Kirktober.
Exactly. Kirktober, as you call it, exactly right. And how quickly it can fade. Now, again, you could say the same thing about a year ago before he gets hurt. I got to believe that. I'm not saying that in Vikings land, the front office, they're reveling in his pain, although pain's relative given the amount of money he's making through this whole thing.
Yeah.
But they got to be pretty haughty about. Well, yeah. They made the decision ultimately that we're not going to match what only I think one other team was willing to match, and they look like geniuses now. Maybe you argue if he's here, it's different, and they didn't handle him well in Atlanta, and the play calling wasn't. Who knows? But they make the decision that we can only go so far. He walks away, and the bridge guy they get, you could say in Atlanta they would have been better off getting Darnold for the bridge year and then moving on to Penix. Vikings, in this regarding the way they've handled the quarterback position to this point, they look like geniuses.
Yeah, they do. I think you look at, they could have brought Cousins back, but you're still doing it at a higher cap number than Darnold would have been here. And I also wonder, with that Achilles, we've seen so much of his year affected, I think, by that lack of mobility. Yep. Not that he had a lot, but I think even what he had was reduced. And you look at Darnold extending plays, running for first downs, being able to do things, kind of throwing downfield because he can get away from a defender or two. I think that's made a big difference. I don't know that it's plug and play that you're 12-2 with Kirk in his current state of health. I'm not sure. I mean, he knows the offense obviously well enough to, I think, run it at a high level, but would they be quite in the same spot? I don't know that they would, because does it restrict them defensively to sign some of the guys that they did? And then is he able to play in a way where he does what Sam Darnold has done? I think for a lot of reasons, they have every reason to feel pretty good about what they did or what they didn't do. And certainly they won't say it, but yeah, I'm sure they're feeling quite happy with their decision there.
Thanks for the time as always, my friend. Safe travels to Seattle. We'll talk on the other side of the holidays. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Happy holidays, Dan.
Ben Goessling, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Vikings programming is right around the corner. And then later tonight, the emotional return of Karl Anthony Towns, not only on the Timberwolves channel via the iHeartRadio app, new and improved version coming in early January, but also on the FM flamethrower, the juggernaut, 100.3 The Fan. I think opening tap is scheduled for sometime between 8:30 and 9 o'clock Central, because we are the second game of the big national doubleheader. I'm out for a few days. Gaardsy's in and out as well. Happy holidays to you and yours. And as I said, prepare now for a little bit more Thursday Vikings programming before the Wolves take over. Stay tuned.
Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the great time. We love you, Dan.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. And now I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun, Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from, with new games released each week. You can play for free, and each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
The only thing better than the holidays are holidays packed with NFL games. Kicking off Thursday, December 19th with the AFC West Showdown.
Touchdown Chargers!
Then a Saturday doubleheader. 12 games Sunday with a battle in Lambeau on Monday night.
Oh, what a play! What a catch!
And a Christmas Day doubleheader for the ages on Netflix.
Oh, sweet Marie!
That's how the NFL does the holidays.
You wake up, put on your Ray-Ban Meta glasses. You're living all in. You realize you need coffee. So you say,
Hey, Meta, how do I make a latte?
Brew 2 shots of espresso.
after Meta AI gets you caffeinated, you're ready for some beats.
Hey, Meta, play hip-hop music.
You head to meet some friends, but can't remember the place.
Hey, Meta, call Eva.
Ray-Ban Meta glasses, the next generation of AI glasses. Just say, hey, Meta, to harness the power of Meta AI. Shop now at meta.com/smartglasses.